Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Common Sense Gospel. I am Danny Simmons,
And I'm Kurt Norbert.
and we are looking at I wouldn't say special lady. We are looking at women in the Bible, and you may remember as we started this season 9, we talked about godly women in the Bible. I misstated that several times, and this woman is the reason why that was misstated. She's not godly in any way. She's not a good woman. She's a wretch and wicked, and maybe you would call her a battle axe. Terms like that have been used to define the worst of women. She is the queen of them all, and so we'll look at her, and it's important to do this. We enjoy looking at godly women in the Bible. We've just really, really enjoyed looking at the ones so far and thinking of the ones that are coming up and watching them frame by frame and verse by verse because there's so many things to learn. But even in this dark moment with Jezebel, we're going to learn some things about wickedness, and we're going to learn some things about how God sees all of this and what he will do when he's had enough. And so Jezebel highlights some of that for us in a way that maybe a godly woman could warn us, certainly, but not show us by and through her own actions. So Jezebel is the star today. Do you have any thoughts on her before we get moving?
Well, she is, of course, infamous for her wickedness. Jezebel is not a very popular name for girls
It is not.
because she's so evil.
Yep.
And it's interesting, her name means, "Where is the Lord?" Which from our standpoint is a question she should have asked.
Yes, absolutely. And I've got eight things here that she does specifically that reveal this wickedness and her contempt for God and for God's people. And so the first one we come to is in 1 Kings chapter 16. I'm going to read from verse 30 because it talks about Ahab now being installed as king. Verse 30 says, "Now Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. And it came to pass, as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that he took his wife, Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and he went and served Baal and worshipped him. Then he set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a wooden image. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him." So wicked, wicked, terrible king. But she is the mover here. She's come in now from Sidon. She's the daughter of the king there, and she has now married Ahab. So she's now the queen of Israel. She brought Baal worship from Sidon into Israel and before God's people. She influenced Ahab, first of all, to serve Baal. She built a temple and altar for Baal. It says here that Ahab did, but we know she's the influence and the force behind all that because she brought him in. And so these things were built up in Samaria. She's going to lead, and we can't just like race through these because each one is awful. She's going to lead the nation into deep idolatry, to be so confused about who they actually serve and who God really is that the prophets are working triple overtime to convince the people that don't leave the Lord. God is our king.
Yeah, Israel, the northern kingdom is what I'm talking about now. It just had a constant slide away from God. Verse 31, where you just read, it equates what Ahab did with the sins of Jeroboam. And he is the one that most of the Israelite kings are equated to, because when the kingdom split and God had made him king, the first thing he did was create idols in Dan and Beersheba for the people to go worship, so they wouldn't go back to Judah and worship in Jerusalem and be influenced by Rehoboam and the Jews down there to stay.
Come
and
back
be
to the
loyal.
Lord. Mm-hmm.
And we're told when he became king, many of the priests left the northern kingdom and went down south because they weren't going to have any part of this stuff. So to stop that migration, he says, "Oh, well, Israel, here are your gods. I'll put one up north and one down south so it's convenient for you." But he introduced wholesale idolatry into Israel, and it just went downhill from there. And here we see pretty much the low point that they reached. And as you say, Jezebel was really the power behind the throne here. We're going to see that Ahab is so weak-kneed and wimpy and such a coward that she easily influences him.
Yeah.
And gets her way. She gets done what she wants to get done.
That's right. There's even a verse that tells us that, and we'll get to that as well. It's important to note that this idolatry, the king and the queen engaged building these temples and all of that. This was not casual idolatry. It wasn't something they kept in the privacy of their home. It was a national, government-backed religious corruption that was overriding the whole reason the nation was where they were and what God had done for them and given them. So God is not happy about this. Make no mistake. And not only is this a government-backed and supported form of worship and idolatry, there's also the 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah, and apparently all of them belong to Jezebel, because in 1 Kings 18, there's an interesting scene where Elijah says to Obadiah, "Go and tell King Ahab that I'm here and I need to speak to him." And remember, Obadiah is worried. He says, "If I go tell him and you disappear again, he'll have me killed." And so he says, "I will surely stand before him. Go get him." So Obadiah goes and gets him. Then it happened in verse 17 of 1 Kings 18. Then it happened when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said to him, listen to this, "Is that you, O troubler of Israel?"
Yeah.
Wow. He answered and said, "I have not troubled Israel, but you and your father's house, in that you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and have followed the Baals. Now, therefore, send and gather all of Israel to me on Mount Carmel, the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." There we go. Now we know who's orchestrating all of this with this false worship of false gods.
Yep, she's supporting all of this. And this is going to lead to the first of what I think are the two great examples of just how hard-hearted and ruthless and cold-blooded and ungodly Jezebel is. Because we're coming up to the famous confrontation on Mount Carmel with Elijah, and it's always labeled Elijah and the 450 prophets of Baal, which, yeah, there were 450 prophets of Baal there.
Mm-hmm.
But as you pointed out, there are also 400 prophets of Asherah. So it's actually Elijah against 750 false prophets that are all aggressively and wholeheartedly supported by Jezebel.
Yes, sir. I think we should stop doing math on these recordings, because 400 plus 450 is...
It's 750 plus 100.
Oh, the mic cut out when you said plus 100. That's what happened. Okay, so you were right, 850. Yeah, anytime numbers come up, we both blank out for some reason. So
yeah, it's easy to do.
The important thing here, and I want us to take note of this, because these little verses can encourage all of us. When Ahab saw Elijah in verse 17, he says to him, "Is that you, O troubler of Israel?" You see how wicked people see the righteous? You've done nothing but cause trouble. You oppose everything we want to do. Everything we've decided to do, you oppose. And Elijah puts it right back on him and says, "You're the one who's troubling Israel because of your wretched behavior. You've forsaken the commandments of the Lord and you follow the Baals." That is the trouble of Israel. And so Elijah's right, obviously, but just don't forget about a king and queen who say, we could do everything we wanted if it wasn't for that Elijah guy, this prophet of God. He ruins everything we want to do. They're not willing to take note of, Elijah's not the trouble of Israel. We're the one causing all the trouble, and he's trying to bring God's people back to the Lord. People like this will never see that truth. They don't perceive it that way. They don't see themselves as the bad guy. And so it just shows the weak condition of Ahab. You mentioned him being so cowardly, and obviously his wife's running the show in the wrong direction. That doesn't have to be a terrible thing, but here it is terrible. He's just so backwards on everything, and I just want us to see that sometimes you'll be called things that just aren't true.
Well, this is almost 3,000 years ago that this is taking place, and things have not changed. Because if you pick up certain literature, you'll find it proclaimed that Christians are the problem in this country.
That's right.
We are hard-hearted. We're hypocrites. We're homophobic. We're against everybody. We're judgmental. Yada. The list goes on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have everything would be fine if it wasn't for you Christians that are always causing problems.
Yeah.
So things have not changed. And Jesus warned us they wouldn't be. He says, if they hate you, it's because they hated me. So righteousness and truth and purity and justice are always going to be hated.
Yeah.
Because it reveals to those who want to go their own way that they're wrong.
I know. Shining
And
the light.
human pride just said, well, I'm not wrong. I'm enlightened. I'm fair to everybody. I accept everything. I'm tolerant. Well, yeah, tolerant to the point where there's really no law except what you want done.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, from that viewpoint, anybody else who disagrees is a troublemaker because they're not allowing you to live in peace with your decisions
Right.
and with what you've decided to do with your life. It's all their fault. Well, that way I don't have to look at myself as the scriptures tell us to do. Look at yourself and measure yourself up to God,
Right.
to Jesus.
That's always
to
a standard.
the divine standard.
Yeah.
When you start measuring yourself by human standards, well, then it's easy to justify yourself and show what a great person you are because you measure yourself by others and perhaps by yourself. Well, God says man is not the standard.
No.
Because we're fallible, we're weak. As we can see in Jezebel, we can descend into the depths of depravity and say it's okay.
Yeah.
And therefore, the light that shines on it is an evil thing to be avoided.
Yeah.
So this still goes on today. We shouldn't be surprised. It always will until Jesus returns.
Yeah. I feel like we need to say that there may be people who listen to us who are in the middle of something with an individual or a group of people, and they're being called the bad guy because they're trying to stand up for what is right. Just be sure that there's nothing new here. This is the way they respond, and we need to be aware of that. I think it's comforting and it's helpful. So we have now Jezebel. We're told that she fed and maintained 850 prophets total. This shows, again, her organized, well-funded campaign to replace the worship of Jehovah. We're even told in 2 Kings 10, this is another piece to this, but 2 Kings 10, Jehu goes to the man who's in charge of the wardrobe of the prophets of Baal and says, pull out all the vestments and the ceremonial robes. We're going to have a great feast. He's tricking them, but he says, we're going to have a great feast unto Baal. And so they put all this garb on all these people to be proper Baal worshipers. It just speaks to the length and degree that she's gone to establish this form of worship. It dominates the nation right now. And so after this, we know, because of what 1 Kings 18 tells us, that she violently persecuted and murdered the prophets of the Lord. 1 Kings 18 and verse 4 says, Jezebel massacred the prophets of the Lord, and Obadiah, I mentioned him just a minute ago, he had taken 100 prophets and hidden them, 50 to a cave, and had fed them with bread and water. They're so powerfully oppressed by the queen that they're hiding in caves. And these are recognized by the word of God as prophets of God. And then again in verse 13, it says again, was it not reported to my Lord what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord, how I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets, 50 to a cave? So he repeats it there again, but it points out the intense pressure. She has the authority of all of the soldiers, the army, whatever the nation can afford for defense and for keeping things in order. She's using them to hunt down God's people and God's messengers.
Yeah, and God will have his vengeance on that.
I know.
He's seeing his prophets be massacred. Well, God doesn't forget that, and he doesn't forsake his people. It's going to turn out that a whole bunch of her prophets are going to be massacred too.
Yeah, that's right, in the same chapter. And when you see an edict or a ruler forcing other faithful Israelites to hide people they know to be godly, just imagine that, the terror for everybody. If you're going to hide these and try to protect people that are preaching truth, that now you're at risk. You can lose your life for such
Obadiah
behavior.
was risking himself to
And
do that.
Right. He knew that. He put his life on the line for these men, and he brought them food. So he's repeatedly returning to these caves to give them food. his neck is on the line every time that he does it, and it's just bigger than the prophets being killed. It's those who try to help that now they're in fear. It's just terrible. And really, because of her persecution of the prophets, this is one of the clearest marks of her hatred for God. We don't want to miss what this means. It's not these individual men that she's like, we just need to kill these men and we'll be good. They represent the Lord. And so her hatred is to God or against God.
Yeah, and I think it's significant. It points out she was massacring them.
I know.
She wasn't just picking off one here and one there secretly. She was going after the people of God and trying to wipe them out.
Yeah.
But now she's going to have that returned into her face.
Yes.
And we see how hard-hearted she is.
I know. I know. She's going to get her comeuppance. We're not quite there yet, because when Elijah meets the 450 prophets of Baal, the 400 of Asherah, he calls down fire from heaven. Ahab's there. We have no word of Jezebel being there. Ahab is there. And Elijah asked the people, how long will you waver?
Mm-hmm.
Which God will you serve? And it tells us so sadly, I think in verse 22, that they answered him not a word.
Yeah.
The people couldn't respond on what it was they should do. Well, Ahab's standing there. How can they say anything? His wife's slaughtering these.
He'll have them put to death.
Yeah. So
probably right there on the spot.
Why not? And so they're in a really tough spot. But so it strengthens this case for Elijah standing alone. And so after he slaughters all of these prophets, Ahab, it's about to start raining. So Ahab races with his horses back to Jezebel. He tells her what took place. And again, you would think, okay, we better switch gods pretty quick. If God can pull fire down from heaven by the voice of this man, we're on the wrong team. You would think that would be the conclusion. But in verse 19:1, it says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. So she sends a messenger to threaten him. You will be dead by this time tomorrow.
Yeah. Which just shows how irrational a person gets when they try to oppose God. When they remove God from their lives, want to have nothing to do with him, they're going to go their own way. You would think that someone who sees that her prophets are powerless. Elijah demonstrates the powerlessness of Baal because they spend most of the day dancing around his altar, working themselves into a frenzy, cutting themselves, doing everything that you're supposed to do to call up your God, and nothing happens. Elijah even mocks him. Oh, well, maybe you should be louder. He might be on vacation, or he might be taking a nap. He might be in the bathroom, just do some more, get his attention. And nothing ever happens. Then he tells the people, okay, build a simple altar to God. I'll put an altar here together, flood it 3 times with water. Mm-hmm. The sacrifice, the altar, the wood, and fills a trench around it. So you'd think, okay, this thing is sodden. No way we can offer a sacrifice by fire on here. And as you pointed out, he simply calls down fire from heaven, and God not only consumes the sacrifice and the altar, but he licks up the water that's in the trench.
Yeah, I love that.
So finally the people are emboldened to say, well, Yahweh is God. Yahweh is God. Okay, the law says kill idolaters. They're to be put to death, which is then what they lawfully do to these prophets of Baal and Asherah.
That's right.
You'd think after hearing of that my God is absolutely powerless and their God can do anything.
Yeah.
Nothing stops him from accomplishing his will.
Nope.
Do I surrender? No. I'm going to go after his prophet that defeated my prophets. I'll teach this God a lesson.
Yeah.
So it just makes no sense. It's irrational.
It is.
And that's the danger of opposing God. Sin makes man irrational. It drives us spiritually insane because we can no longer make valid, rightful decisions because we've become so locked into what we want.
And if you're watching her say this, she says, may the gods do to me and more also if I do not take your life by this time tomorrow. Well,
Yeah, like you did with them.
She got 24 hours to do what she said she would do, or she should be put to death by her own words.
Yeah.
Well, the Lord takes Elijah out into the wilderness and feeds him for 40 days and then moves him on from there. So she missed the mark on what she claimed she was going to do. And even in that, Ahab, Jezebel's like, oh, put my foot in my mouth. There's none of that with this rage. That doesn't matter that she was incorrect about what she sent the messenger to say. And stuff like that really makes me angry that she couldn't do what God's not going to let her do.
Yeah.
Though she had all the power of the armies and the nation of Israel, she could not move if God wouldn't allow it.
Well, it's, again, ironic. She says, may the gods do more to me, or do to me and more also if I don't kill you tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
Well, the gods just showed they can't do anything. They are powerless. So maybe she kind of innately, deep down inside, understood that and called this curse down on herself. The gods won't really do anything to me because they can't.
Yeah, so she knows.
But that's a saying. That was a saying. It's a Hebraism. You know,
Yes.
if I don't nail you like I want to, well, then may it happen to me like I want to do to you.
Right.
But yeah, 40 days later, why is she still alive? Because, like you said, you're going to be dead in 24 hours. Well, God overrode that one too. He shows, no, you're not in charge here in Israel. I am, and preserves the prophet.
Right. It's just awful. And so she's not done. She's working all kinds of angles, doing all kinds of terrible things. In 1 Kings chapter 21, probably one of the worst moments for her, as far as I'm concerned, with the interaction of the people she should have been ruling over with love, compassion, and care. We have a man named Naboth. And so Ahab sees this vineyard of Naboth. He wants it desperately. He goes to Naboth. He makes an attempt and he says, sell me your vineyard. I'll give you whatever you ask for. I want this vineyard. It needs to be part of the king's vineyards. Naboth rightly says, far be it from me, which is, I can't, because it's an inheritance that I received by God's will and that I need to pass on to my children by God's will. That is all perfectly correct. Well, Ahab is so upset that he goes home and he cries like a baby. And so in verse 5, it says, Jezebel, his wife, came to him and said to him, why is your spirit so sullen that you eat no food? Oh,
poor baby.
He's not eating. I feel bad.
Yeah. Here's this guy that's upholding the law of God. The law of Moses said you don't sell your inheritance to an outsider. You keep it within the family. That's what it's all about. Of course, Ahab is so godless, he doesn't care about that. He's not getting what he wants. And so like a child, he goes and turns his face to the wall and pouts. So his loving, kind-hearted wife, Jezebel, comes and says, why are you so upset? How come you're so sad?
What's the matter, honey? Yeah. Verse 6, he said to her, because I spoke to Naboth the Jezreelite and said to him, give me your vineyard for money, or else if it pleases you, I will give you another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give you my vineyard. Then Jezebel, his wife, said to him, you now exercise authority over Israel. Arise, eat food, and let your heart be cheerful. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. Ahab lied.
Yes.
He says that when I asked and I told him I'd pay him for it, he said to me, I will not give you my vineyard. That was the bottom line, but that is not what Naboth said. He told him, as you pointed out, that by the law of Moses. And so what Jezebel does here is she sends a letter by the hand of messengers. And this is what the letter says. Proclaim a fast. These are the people who live in the town of Naboth. Proclaim a fast and seat Naboth with high honor among the people. And seat 2 men, scoundrels, before him to bear witness against him, saying, you have blasphemed God and the king. Then take him out and stone him that he may die. So the men of the city, the elders and nobles who were inhabitants of the city, did as Jezebel had sent to them. As it was written in the letters which she had sent to them, they proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth with high honor among the people. 2 men, scoundrels, came in and sat before him, and the scoundrels witnessed against him, against Naboth, in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth has blasphemed God and the king. Then they took him outside the city and stoned him with stones, so that he died. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth has been stoned and is dead.
What a sleazy woman. It's interesting. Every time these false witnesses are mentioned, they are scoundrels.
Oh, yeah.
She grabs some lowlife and frames this entire false accusation against Naboth and has him murdered just so Ahab can stop pouting and get his little vineyard that he wants.
That's right.
So this innocent blood that she has spilled in Israel is going to come back against her also.
Yep.
Because her blood is going to be spilled.
And ultimately, because she's written these letters for Ahab while he's crying on his bed, she has forged the letters with the king's seal on them in Ahab's name. She arranged, as we've seen, false witnesses. Naboth is falsely accused of blasphemy. She's ordered personally his execution, and then she seizes his property. It's one of the most cold-blooded acts of injustice throughout the entire Old Testament. For Naboth to come into the city with this fasting event, and he's part of that town. He knows these people, and they've brought him in, and they know good and well what they're about to do to him. And no one there has the fortitude to say, you know what, I can't. I'm not doing this. Naboth's a good man. He's part of our town.
With what she has done in the country, it has become so morally corrupt and compromised that, like you say, they'll just go along with this for the sake of peace. Because they know if we don't do this, she's going to kill us too.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, instead of standing up for right at the threat of your life, you compound the sin by letting yourself get involved in it.
And you think you're spared.
Yeah, somehow we'll be okay. Well, ultimately the nation's destroyed because of all of this.
Yeah, don't ever make a deal with evil.
Yeah, but God is not, he's not going to be stopped by this. He has the last word.
I know.
Concerning Jezebel and this whole mess.
And I'm thankful for that. We mentioned before that she's the drive behind Ahab, and I want to give everyone the verse for that. 1 Kings 21 and verse 25. That passage says, there was no one like Ahab who sold himself to do wickedness because Jezebel, his wife, stirred him up. We also know that she practiced sorcery and witchcraft because Jehu says it in 2 Kings 9 and verse 22. He calls her out for whoredoms and witchcraft when he speaks to her son, who is the next king to be, right before he kills him. But it just shows us that there's occult practices tied to Baal and Asherah worship, and we know that. But the final time we see her, and this is what we've all been looking forward to, it's like the peak of the movie when it finally gets good and justice is served. 2 Kings chapter 9 is where she attempts to manipulate and intimidate Jehu in her final moments. So 2 Kings chapter 9, I'm just going to pick up in verse 30. It says, now when Jehu had come to Jezreel, now Jehu has killed all of Ahab's children. Ahab's been wounded and killed in battle. The descendants of Ahab are destroyed by the prophecies of God. Jehu's the one who's doing it. But he's killed everyone. Like everyone he ran into, even on the way up here, he murders them if they have any connection to Ahab. So he's coming for this final person, which is Jezebel. When Jehu had come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it. She put paint on her eyes and adorned her head and looked through a window. This is telling us that she put on makeup.
Yeah, basically getting herself, who knows what her thinking was at this moment. Apparently, seeing what she's done in the past, she thought she could exercise enough power or whatever that she could stymie Jehu. She's going to come out of this okay. But she gets all ready for, just like she's getting ready for a regular day of work, put on the makeup, put on the right clothes and everything, get all dressed up, and then confront Jehu.
I'm the queen. I'm going to do my thing.
Yeah.
And I heard there's an old saying where a guy said, that even an old barn, you can make an old barn look good with a fresh coat of paint.
Yeah.
There's some truth to that.
Yeah, but it doesn't help the inside.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's an old decrepit barn, that ain't going to help.
It's still an old barn, and here we are looking at Jezebel. She painted her eyes and adorned her head. Mm-hmm. She's looking through the window. Jehu entered at the gate. She said, "Is it peace, Zimri, murderer of your master?" Now, it's not accidental that she calls him Zimri, because just a few generations before this, and these generations moved quickly because of all the killing going on, but Elah is the king of Israel. His son, Zimri, not his son, It's a descendant, but he is the captain over half of the chariots of Elah. He commits treason. He kills Elah, and he pronounces himself king. And so he's only king for 7 days.
Yeah.
And then Omri, his son, will take his place. So Jezebel's mentioning Zimri on purpose. Zimri killed his king, and he should not have done that. His reign lasted 7 days, and he burned with fire in his own palace because he knew what was coming. So she's alluding to, are you Zimri?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I am the authority here. You cannot take possession of the power I have, or you'll end up like the one who tried this last time. She's accusing him of treason.
Yeah, and murder.
Mm-hmm.
Which, from her viewpoint, that's what's going on. But he's doing this at the Lord's bidding. God had prophesied this doom for Ahab and Jezebel.
That's right.
Specifically described how Jezebel is going to die. And Jehu is commanded to go and carry this out. Well, he does so very zealously. But it's interesting to me when he's confronted in this way. She looks out the window and makes this accusation. He doesn't even respond to her.
I know.
He just, okay, you're out of here. I don't care. I'm not even going to pay attention to you. He just says, who's on my side? Who? And a couple of eunuchs look out the window. Who's going to help me out here? I'm not dealing with this woman.
Yeah, and these 2 or 3 eunuchs who look out the window at him, they're saying, we're on your side.
Yeah, here we are.
They're her servants.
Yeah.
So this
Which
tells
shows
us
how popular she was.
Exactly. We have unhappy employees at the very least. So 2 or 3 look out at him. Then he said, throw her down. So they threw her down.
Yeah, that's it. Here's the queen of Israel, who has thought so highly of herself. Here's what it is. He doesn't even answer her. Throw her down. So they threw her down. That's it. That's the end of Jezebel. Plus what God is going to carry out to fulfill his judgment on her. Yeah, she's dead, but that's not the end of it all.
No, it's not.
He gives her the most despicable death you could think of.
Yeah, he really does. And so now she's cast out of this window, and Jehu looks up and he's like, well, at least she looks good.
I guess.
With all that pretty makeup on, she's thrown out of the window, and then it says just very simply, some of her blood splattered on the wall. This is a high window.
Yeah.
She's hit the
Apparently
ground
so,
really
yeah.
hard.
Mm-hmm.
Some of her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses, and he, Jehu, trampled her underfoot. So basically what we're told here, it depends on what translation you read, but Jehu basically takes his horses and his chariot, he runs over her and backs over her and runs over her and backs over her over and over and over again. And I've heard it said that he kept running over her until she was completely and thoroughly tired.
That
You're
was
welcome.
well deserved, Annie.
You're welcome.
The official ding.
I'm glad you got it, because I figured you'd be like, what are you talking about? Because chariots have wheels, but
Well, yeah, wheels, tires. It's a bit of a stretch, but yeah, I got it.
Plus
and that's why you got dinged.
plus you can tell by the look on my face that I'm being silly. So trampled underfoot. And then the next verse says, when he had gone in, he ate and drank.
Yeah. He is so heartless about all of this.
I know.
But he does have a speck of decency about him, because then he goes on after he has a nice lunch. Go now and see to this accursed woman. So he's right about that. And bury her, for she was a king's daughter. So she's royalty. I guess we ought to bury her. There's not much left of her after being thrown out of the window and trampled over and over. But go and bury her, give her a burial. But it's too late.
That's right. And it says that as they went to bury her, they found no more than her skull, feet, the palms of her hands. Therefore they came back and told him, and he said, this is the word of the Lord, which he spoke by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, on the plot of ground at Jezreel, dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the corpse of Jezebel shall be as refuse on the surface of the field, in the plot at Jezreel, so that they shall not say, here lies Jezebel. We talk about the Lord watching her inflict so much torment and torture on the prophets of God. These are God's people. She's misleading the nation. She's the heart and soul of this effort. and we talk about God's anger and his fury, that the prophecy is so disgusting and so awful. She will be eaten by dogs. There's no worse way for a Jew that I can think of for something to happen to their body after they've passed from this life. And then the prophecy goes on to say that the corpse of Jezebel shall be dung. Remember, she's eaten by dogs.
Yep.
She will now be dung on the surface of the field. These dogs are going to run out and naturally process her flesh and pass through their stomach. And she will be scattered across the fields by the dung of these dogs. It is scary.
A thoroughly humiliating and dishonorable death, eaten by unclean animals, dogs.
Yes.
Basically, the Jews kind of use dogs as trash collectors. You know, throw the old food out and whatever, and let the dogs have it.
The dogs will eat it, yeah.
And they go ahead and shout out on Jezebel. There's nothing, literally, left of her. Her example or her personage is not worth being reminded of, but her example is certainly kept alive. You get all the way to the end of the New Testament, Revelation 2, when Jesus addresses the church at Thyatira. They're having a problem with immorality in the church, fornication and idolatry. And apparently there's a woman in the church that is encouraging the saints to do that. And God calls her Jezebel,
That's
Revelation 2:20.
That's right.
I have a few things against you because you allow that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, to teach and seduce my servants to commit sexual immorality and eat things sacrificed to idols. I gave her time to repent of her sexual immorality. She did not repent.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, see, well named. You know, this is not Jezebel, of course, and that's probably not her name, but he's equating her activities with this evil woman that we've been studying.
And they know who she is.
They
they know exactly
right away know who's being talked about.
Yeah. So this is the first bad seed we've looked at. I mean, Eve had serious issues, but this is a really, really wicked woman. And so we've considered one who's shown us some things about how dark life can get and how dark our hearts can become against God, that we don't want to ever be like her, because the Lord takes note of everything that we think, say, and do. We have Bible trivia questions for each other.
Yes, we do.
And we need to lay those down because we have people waiting.
And I think I went first last time, so you can do the honors today.
Okay, here we go.
Trivia, sweet trivia.
Which prophet of God saved the wise men of Babylon by explaining and interpreting the dream of King Nebuchadnezzar?
That would be Daniel.
Daniel.
A young Daniel, in fact.
Yes, sir. It was Daniel chapter 2, verses 46 through 49, kind of encapsulates it there, where the king praises Daniel's God because he was the only one of all the wise men and sorcerers and magicians to know the answer.
Okay, here's your first question for the day. When Joseph's family came down into Egypt, what part of the land did Pharaoh give to them to live in?
Goshen.
That's right, the land of Goshen. Genesis chapter 47, verses 5 and 6, the best area of the land.
That is crazy that's one of the questions. I was Wednesday night, I was talking to some of our members and I said, "Dad, sounds like Goshen." And they all looked at me like I was speaking a different language. I said, these are younger members, but I said, "Do you not know what I'm talking about?" And like, "What did you say, Goshen?" I said, "Yeah."
Time for a Bible study.
That's right. Open
go.
your Bibles. This is where Joseph took his family and they were protected and they grew.
So you were armed and ready for this
Yeah.
particular
It's
question.
just interesting how those things come up
Good deal.
kind of back to back like that.
Yeah.
Your second question, the third question for all of our listeners who are probably doing pretty well so far. Who was the first person in the Bible to raise someone from the dead?
I'm going to say, I always get these two confused. It's either Elijah or Elisha. And it was the son of the widow of Zarephath
That's right.
that, first of all, was given this child by God. Elijah pronounced that she would have a son. Then he turns around and dies, and she sends to him. He says, this is the child you gave me from the Lord, and now he's dead. What's going on here? So he goes in and resurrects the child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I give you the Tishbite, does that help you?
Elisha.
Oh, that didn't help you at
No, it
all
didn't.
because I gave you the wrong name. It's Elijah.
Yeah. I always get him confused because Elisha did some pretty mighty miracles because he was endued with a double portion of the spirit that Elijah had.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
Elijah. And I think I said Elijah during my answer. So
You did. You're okay.
yeah. Anyway, at least I knew what the story was.
You did.
What happened?
You knew it
there.
very well.
Yeah.
You get credit, buddy.
I need to get my prophets straight.
What's our last question?
It is this. Who was chosen to replace the traitor Judas as an apostle?
Matthias.
That's right. Acts chapter 1, verses 21 through 26. It is Matthias.
Okay.
They set aside 2. And who chose him to be an apostle? Here's a little bonus question.
God.
That's right.
They cast
Personally, I
lots.
think it was Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Because
well,
Jesus chose his apostles.
Yeah.
And so they said, Lord, show us now which of these you have chosen. And they drew lots, and the lot fell to Matthias. And he was
Amen.
numbered among the 11 apostles. So good job.
Thank you very
We're
much.
4 for 4 today. Well, I got 1.5, I guess.
No, you did all right. We get credit. So as we close today, we looked at a woman who was very, very wicked before the Lord. And her death ultimately fulfilled Elijah's prophecy. She was thrown out of a window, trampled by horses, and it's written somewhere that all the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Jezebel back together again.
Oh, boy.
But Ahab and Jezebel were warned in all seriousness. They were warned continuously by the prophets of God and by the prophecies they spoke. Jezebel worshiped Baal, led the people into idolatry, and she hated God and she hated his prophets. At some point, God will deal with those who oppose him. Leave you all with a proverb. Proverbs 29 and verse 1. He who is often rebuked and hardens his neck will suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy.